August 1940. The sun is setting over the English Channel, but for the people of London, the light brings no comfort. In the distance, a low, rhythmic hum begins to vibrate in the floorboards. It's a sound that has become the heartbeat of a nation under siege, the synchronized roar of hundreds of Junkers and Heinkels. The Battle of Britain was supposed to be a duel of pilots, the few against the many. But behind the dogfights, a different kind of war was being lost. The British military was bleeding. Their anti-aircraft guns were firing thousands of rounds into the night sky, hitting almost nothing. Their radar was revolutionary, yet the information was getting lost in a chaotic web of phone lines and bad math. The generals were desperate. They were looking for a miracle weapon. Instead, they got a biologist, a mathematician, and a handful of physicists. They were called Blackett's Circus, and they were about to prove that a slide rule could be just as lethal as a Spitfire. Meet Patrick Blackett. To the military brass at Anti-Aircraft Command, he was an outsider, a scientist, a man who looked at a battlefield not as a place of glory, but as a giant, messy data set. Blackett was a pioneer of what we now call operational research. His task was simple on paper, but impossible in practice: figure out why the British defenses were failing. He didn't start by designing a better gun. He started by watching the men using the guns. He and his Circus, a ragtag group of academics, including a surveyor and a physiologist, embedded themselves in the batteries. They realized the soldiers weren't the problem, the system was. In the 1940s, the lost dispatch wasn't always a physical letter. It was the data that never made it to the top. Blackett discovered that the time it took for a radar operator to tell a gunner where to aim was longer than it took for a German bomber to move out of range. The British were literally aiming at ghosts of the past. To fix this, the Circus didn't ask for more firepower. They asked for better clocks and standardized reporting. They redesigned the communication flow, shaving seconds off the reaction time. Suddenly, those useless guns started finding their targets. It wasn't magic. It was the first real-world application of systems optimization. The Circus didn't stop at the shoreline. Their most controversial work happened in the freezing, oil-slicked waters of the North Atlantic. By 1942, U-boats were strangling Britain, sinking merchant ships faster than they could be built. The situation was dire. The island was weeks away from starvation. The Navy's solution was traditional: more escorts, faster ships, and more depth charges. They believed smaller convoys were easier to hide and maneuver. Blackett looked at the numbers and saw something entirely different. He noticed a pattern in the kill logs that everyone else had ignored. He realized that the size of the convoy mattered more than the number of guards protecting it. The math showed that if you doubled the size of a convoy, the number of ships lost didn't double. It actually decreased. Why? Because the perimeter of a large group of ships isn't that much bigger than a small one, making it exponentially harder for a U-boat to find a gap. It was counterintuitive and radical. To the old-school admirals, it sounded like madness, a direct insult to centuries of naval tradition. They wanted more steel. Blackett was giving them more geometry. But when they finally listened and merged the small convoys into massive fleets, the loss rates plummeted. The misfits had just won the Battle of the Atlantic with a sheet of graph paper. The Circus then turned their attention to the skies over Europe. Bomber Command was losing planes at an alarming rate. When planes returned, riddled with bullet holes, the engineers naturally wanted to add armor to the places where the holes were. It seemed like common sense, but Blackett and his team pointed out a brilliant hidden truth. The holes represented where a plane could be hit and still survive. The lost dispatch in this case was the data from the planes that never came back. They argued that the armor should go where there were no holes, the engines and the cockpit, because hits in those areas were the ones sending bombers to the ground. This concept, known as survivorship bias, saved thousands of Allied airmen. By 1945, the Circus had expanded into every branch of the Allied forces. They optimized the color of planes, finding that a specific shade of sky blue made bombers nearly invisible to subcrews looking up. They calculated the exact depth at which a depth charge should explode to crack a U-boat hull, discovering the Navy had been setting them too deep for years. They took the chaos of war and turned it into a cold, hard science. Patrick Blackett would eventually go on to win a Nobel Prize, but his greatest contribution remains largely hidden in the archives. He proved that in the heat of conflict, the most dangerous thing you can have is a closed mind, and the most powerful weapon is the truth hidden in the data. Today we call the legacy of the Circus by many names: DevOps, data science, and systems engineering. We use these same principles to run our cities, secure our networks, and manage global logistics. We are living in a world built by the logic of Blackett's team. But 80 years ago, these were just radical ideas from a group of civilians who refused to accept that's just how it's done as an answer. Their work was the secret engine of victory, tucked away in reports that were classified for decades. History remembers the generals who signed the treaties and the pilots who won the dogfights. Their bravery is unquestionable. But the story of Blackett's Circus reminds us that wars are also won in the quiet corners of a library, in the frantic scribbles on a chalkboard, and in the courage to look at a map and see a pattern no one else noticed. The voices of these scientists were almost lost to time, buried under the weight of official histories that prefer heroes with guns over heroes with slide rules. But here at the Lost Dispatch, we believe the full story is the only one worth telling. We believe that the archives still hold secrets that can change how we see the past and how we prepare for the future. If you want to uncover more stories that the textbooks missed and the narratives that we forgot to mention, hit the subscribe button and join our ranks. We are the Lost Dispatch. The files are open, the voices are recovered, and this has been a dispatch from the front lines of history.